Hey guys, I'm Justin with Legato Financial Group. Our firm is passionate about helping educate consumers, which is why we're powering the Gaining Interest podcast. The podcast of quick conversations with industry experts on topics that you want to know about, from sports to dining to healthcare and automotive, and really everything in between. It's hosted by one of the greatest local personalities that I've met, that's John Ramsey.
I'll tell you why I love this podcast, because it's all about community. We used to call it water cooler talk, and that no longer exists. But if it's interesting to you, it's interesting to us. We encourage you to tell your friends. As Justin mentioned, we're going to talk about everything under the sun. We will be gaining interest, and we appreciate you watching. Welcome to Gaining Interest, powered by Legato Financial Group. You know, when it comes to estate planning or tax planning or retirement planning, certainly Legato Financial Group is one of the leaders. So when they tell me that I'm going to be talking to a true expert, respected around the country, I believe them. And we have him with us right now. Jeffrey Levine joins us via Zoom. Jeffrey, welcome in.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Jeffrey, I was looking at your resume, and it is really impressive. First of all of these letters behind your name, you're a certified financial planner, a certified public accountant, personal financial specialist, certified wealth strategist. It goes on and on. When you give an elevator speech to your clients or maybe some of your peers, what do you say you do?
I just say I nerd out in financial planning. I mean, that's really what it is. You know, I just try to, I was told early on in my career, there was an advisor I was talking to, and he said, I spend X amount of hours learning 95% of the material, and I'd have to spend the same amount of time to learn the last 5% that I did for the first 95%. And I don't find that a great use of my time. Instead, I just know people who I can call on for that last 5%. And for me, I always wanted to be in that, I want to know that last 5%. So I spend my time really diving into, the tax code, the regulations, when people say, like, what do you read? It's like, I read the source material, right? That's where I live. That's my home. That's my happy place. And then what I love is just helping to translate that for others so that more people can spend their time working with their clients directly, not having to go down the rabbit hole that is our tax code, our regulations, and so forth, because that is really, in a sense, a full-time job. And so if it's my passion, let me share it with as many people as possible so that they can in turn help as many possible elsewhere.
I'm curious, Jeffrey, on a personal level here, when did you discover that you had this, the financial space had this allure for you? Obviously, it had to be very young. I mean, you're in my world, you're young now. So you became accomplished very quickly. When did you discover, hey, this is my thing?
Yeah, it's a great question, and for me, it was really a series of very unrelated events that everybody always thinks. So let me take a step back. Are you familiar with Ed Slott at all?
Yes.
Okay, so a lot of people know him within the industry, right? He's like the country's guru for IRAs, 401ks, et cetera. So my mother's the managing partner for that company, and when people hear that, they immediately assume like, oh, well, this was always the path he was going to go on. But the reality is I wanted to be a doctor until I was like 22. And I was talking with a bunch of doctors in a hospital, and they sort of all said, like, if you can find something you're passionate about that's not this, stay away. The insurance companies are really hurting the industry, and we don't have the same control over helping patients as we did in years past. And I decided to go a different route. And I didn't know what to do, but I had always heard, I'd been in the office there, right? Like I said, my mother's a managing partner. I grew up around it. I said, let me kind of dive in, and I'm gonna fast forward you several years and iterations of random things. But after my first kind of real job in the financial services industry kind of came to an end, and it was time for us to just go different ways because we each wanted different things out of the relationship, Ed put me in touch with an advisor he knew who had just written a book. And it was a book all about retirement and so forth. And I went and I met the advisor. He was so nice to give me some time to like point me in the right direction, give me some career tips. But it turned out that he had just written a book. And so the night before I was scheduled to meet him, I went to his book signing. I bought a copy of his book, had him sign it, introduced myself. And I went home that night and I stayed up all night reading the book because I wanted to go in the next day and have a great conversation with him about his book. If he was going to take some time to be interested in me, I wanted to show that I was interested in him. And before I went in the next day, I reached out to Ed and I said, hey, I know this is going to sound weird, but I think there may be these like 3 or 4 mistakes in this book that I found. And at the time, I'm in my early 20s, and this advisor was a very seasoned advisor. And Ed goes, there's no mistakes in that book. Trust me. I'm pretty sure. I've been listening to you kind of by osmosis for a long time. And I ended up faxing him the pages, and he calls me back 10 minutes later and tells you, by the way, how long ago this is. I faxed him the pages, but he goes, son of a gun, you're right. How do you know this? And I said, but doesn't everyone know this? I'd been listening to you forever. And, everyone has their unique abilities. Mine is I can listen to a song twice and I remember all the lyrics. And so for me, it was second nature, some of this stuff. And I started to realize that it wasn't as common as I thought. And that was where my calling was, right? My calling was to get into the weeds, to really understand the nitty-gritty nuances. Again, that last 5%, and then to help translate that for everyone else. And that's kind of the genesis of what has led me into the financial services business and kept me there, and where my passions lie.
Through this conversation, the brief conversation we've had, I'm already starting to gather why you are the go-to guy when it comes to the Wall Street Journal, Forbes magazine, CNBC. You're considered an expert and someone they go to. It seems that you communicate very well. Jeffrey, I'm already gathering through this conversation that you're really a masterful communicator. Is that why you think you're the go-to guy when it comes to CNBC, Forbes magazine, Wall Street Journal? We could go on and on, Washington Post. Is it your ability to communicate, or what would you say is your special sauce?
First off, thank you. And I appreciate just being in the conversation of folks who are called upon to help with any of those situations. For me, it's really two things, right? One, it's taking the really complicated stuff and trying to break it down into understandable pieces and communicating well. But the other part is trying to make things fun. So one of the things I sort of became known for early on in my career was back when Twitter was Twitter. I don't know, I think now it's X or whatever. But, anytime there was a new law or major regulation issued or whatnot, I would go through it because I wanted to. That's my nerdy thing. But I would tie it together with some sort of GIF-filled theme. So we had, one bill was like all Star Wars themes, gifts related to it. And one was The Office. And, it's one of those things where I've always believed that if people are interested in something, if they're excited, if they're entertained, they're going to pay a little bit more attention and they're going to gather it. And for me, some of the most rewarding conversations I have today are when I'm out and about and someone says, oh, I remember that law. That was, that was the Star Trek law, wasn't it? It's like, oh, you were following along those memes. Yes, that's exactly correct. So trying to keep it interesting and entertaining. And, look, you mentioned at the beginning, I'm a CPA. My ilk, my friends, we're not known for our enthusiastic. I mean, I don't want to speak ill of my profession, but generally speaking, that's not when you say CPA, excited and entertaining and things like that are not typically things you associate with CPAs. So just trying to be, effervescent, keeping people interested. And again, if people are more engaged, they tend to learn better. And so marrying that with then a breakdown that people can understand, that they can then put into action themselves. Because ultimately, that's what people care about. Like, how do I, not just can I know this information, but how do I use this information to actually take a positive step forward for me to put me in a better position tomorrow than I otherwise would have been?
Okay. Yeah, I can see why you'd be a great speaker. You're exactly right. Sometimes the subject matter is tough for someone like me to digest, and you make it fun, and it's a learning process. I've also noticed someone called you, they said you're a leading voice for uncertain times. So we're talking about the financial world, of course. Are we currently in an uncertain time? I'm assuming that's a hard yes.
For sure. And I feel like we've been in that uncertain time for quite a while, but it's without getting into the politics of situations, because that is obviously something that is the third rail for sure. But it's fair to point out that so much of what we do as advisors today isn't just helping clients to grow their assets, it's helping them to keep it. And part of that keep is minimizing tax liability. And when it comes to taxes in particular, today's hyper-politicized climate really presents a difficult planning challenge. And the primary reason for that is simply the way that legislation is passed in our country, right? Most legislation requires 60 votes in the Senate to move forward, to get to something officially known as cloture, but basically means you can vote on the issue in the Senate with 60 plus votes. That's where the filibuster comes in and so forth. There's very few exceptions to that. One is like judicial nominees, you just need a simple majority. But another one is fiscal legislation, something called reconciliation is a process where you can pass tax legislation with only a simple majority. And we are so evenly split in our country today that we almost never have 60 votes in the Senate. It's why you don't see like big swings in gun control legislation from one administration to the next, because you can't get 60 votes in the Senate to actually accomplish that. But what we do see is major tax law changes can occur because it's not that uncommon to have the White House, the Senate with a simple majority, and the House with a simple majority controlled by one party. If we go back just the last 20 years or so, we had major changes implemented in the way of healthcare legislation via the Affordable Care Act. That was passed by Democrats via the reconciliation process with a simple majority in the Senate. Fast forward a few years later to 2017, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which gave us, the quote unquote Trump tax bill from the original Trump administration. That was passed when Republicans had only a simple majority in the Senate, a simple majority in the House, and the presidency. Few years later, Democrats had control again. We got the Inflation Reduction Act. And just last year, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act was passed by Republicans, who again controlled the House, a simple majority in the Senate, and the presidency. And these are big, sweeping bills that have dramatic changes on planning. And they are more likely to happen in that tax area simply because we can pass legislation. So when it comes to uncertain times, we are very much in uncertain times today, and that's heightened even more so when it comes to taxes, probably compared to anything else, again, simply by virtue of the way our legislative process works.
So Jeffrey, along those same lines, if you're someone who is approaching retirement age and you're trying to do some estate planning, tax planning, et cetera, what should we now, with current trends, what should we be excited about, and what should we maybe say, okay, this one is a red flag?
Yeah, well, I think one of the first things to think about here is that you can't believe everything you hear when it comes to taxes. So right now, the current tax brackets and the current tax rates we have and the standard deduction and a lot of the base policy that we have today are the permanent rules. Those are quote unquote permanent. But one of the things I'm very fond of saying is like permanent when it comes to the tax law doesn't mean permanent like it does in just about any other area of our lives. Like I have 3 young kids, okay? We have a white couch in one of our rooms. One of the things that we never do, we absolutely will not let them use permanent marker when they are sitting on that couch, right? Because permanent there means really like we're never getting that black marker out of that couch if they use it there. But permanent from the tax law just really means this is the rule until some future Congress comes along and changes its mind. And as we just discussed, that happens all the time. So for me, one of the takeaways is if you believe that a current rule is relatively favorable, for instance, if you think today's rates are comparatively lower than they will be in the future, if you think the current estate and gift tax exemption is higher than it will otherwise be in the future, then there should be a bias towards action today, doing things that take advantage of those rules, why they exist, because today's tax law is very much like that old infomercial, right? It's like buy now while supplies last. And you don't know how long, right? Is it going to take 2 hours, 2 days, 2 weeks for people to call in and use up that inventory? I don't know whether today's permanent tax rules will be here for a year, 5 years, 10 years, but I'm pretty confident that if we were to be back recording again 10 years from today, that our permanent rules have changed somewhat. So they're not really permanent.
Oh, interesting. So I'm curious, when you talk to some of your clients or your peers, I would think something that's very important to try, and you seem to have this, to make, if you could possibly make this contagious, is confidence. Choices that you make, you want to have your clients feel like this is the best one for me. What advice would you give financial planners in terms of how to make their clients feel a sense of confidence?
Well, I think the first thing is clients want to know that they don't want to know that you know everything. They just want to know that if you don't know something, that you can raise the issue for them and get them in touch with the right folks, right? They truly want, whether you want to call it the quarterback, there's a lot of cliched terms out there that we use in the industry, but they're really looking for that person to kind of be their personal family CFO, to understand everything about their finances, and to be able to put them in touch with the right group of professionals if and when they need those things. So you don't have to be an expert in property and casualty, but you probably want to know enough to say, like, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, it's been 5 years since you really updated your property and casualty policy. Home prices have increased dramatically. I'm concerned that you may not have the right replacement ratio. Let's reach out to the right folks and make sure this is taken care of. Again, doesn't mean you have to know all the nitty gritty, but just enough to get people to where they are. And then where you're an expert or you specialize in, then really hit home on that. I think that's one thing. The other thing I really believe that's very important is to have clients understand that we don't work in an area where everything is going to have a defined outcome, right? We do the best we can with the information we have today, and then we do the same thing tomorrow. And sometimes those decisions don't work out the way we want them to, right? Like, there's no guarantee that if you invest your dollars today, that tomorrow they're going to be higher. But when we make good decisions repeatedly over a long period of time, that gives us the best chance of success. But I think it's really important for clients to understand from day one that if we're working together for 20, 30, 40 years, for the rest of your lifetime, there are going to be things that we do that don't work out the way we thought they would. That's okay. We're not going to hit 1,000. We're not trying to bat 1,000 here. We are trying to make the best decision today with the information that we have. And information and internally, the client situation will change from time to time. Client says, yeah, we're done having a family. And all of a sudden, 5 years later, whoop, there's another child that we weren't, planning on. Or maybe it's a tax law that we think is not going to change, but it does. We just react to that situation and then we make the best next decision. And so often, people we're a culture of immediacy today. People want to know, like, what's the thing I need to do to be successful over the long term? It's usually not the thing, right? It's the combination of a lot of little things that are put together that compound over time. I always take myself back to the example of, would you rather have a penny doubled every day for a month, or would you rather have $1 million? And the penny seems so small, but when you start to compound even those little things out, it very quickly exceeds what one big thing can do. So often it's about that continuous process, working with your advisor, making sure your advisor is knowledgeable about what's going on in your life so they can marry it with what's going on in the external world and put you in the best possible position going forward.
That lends itself to my next question. Thanks for the lead there, because here at Legato Financial Group, they take great pride in having a comprehensive plan. And I've talked to their clients, and they like the fact that it's turnkey, whether it be investments, stock market, taxes, estate planning. They can do it all here. What are the key elements that you believe to be when it comes to a comprehensive plan? What are the key elements?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there's so many things that there's obviously the baseline stuff, like the investment that people sometimes minimize that and they say, well, it's not that it's not important. It's just, it's expected today, right? Where access to the capital markets 15, 20 years ago was enough in many cases to make a client happy. Today's clients demand more. And we see that from all the research, from all the major organizations that are out there, as well as a lot of times when organizations interview their own clients and say, what are you looking for? They're looking for help with not just their investments, but they want help with their tax planning. And I'm gonna make a hard distinction here between tax preparation and tax planning. Tax preparation is very much the realm of the enrolled agent, the CPA, the tax preparer. But they are, and again, I say this as a CPA, when we're doing a tax return, tax preparation, you're a glorified historian. You're looking backwards in what happened already, and you're trying to report it correctly. And there's value in that. Don't get me wrong. Like, having a well-drafted tax return is really important, but it doesn't really change what's happening in the future. That's where tax planning comes in. And while a lot of people think that their CPA or tax preparer may be handling that, The reality is that's not true. A lot of people see their CPA or tax preparer once, maybe twice a year, maybe to drop off their documents and take a look at their return, and that's it. And if that's the case, you're not getting tax planning, and that's okay, right? You can have tax preparation and tax planning done by different folks, but I see that as being a major part of a financial plan, the tax planning, the estate planning, making sure that your final wishes are carried out in the way that you want, that your dollars go to who you want in an efficient manner. That is critical to make sure that your end of life decisions are carried out in a way that you want. All of that wraps into the plan. Risk management is critical there. That goes from everything from asset protection. So, if you're in a high risk profession, are your assets as well protected as they should be, to making sure you have the appropriate coverages. And this doesn't mean your financial advisor is pushing, life insurance or property and casualty insurance or any other product down your throat, but it's making sure that if there are risks in your financial plan, that those are addressed, from disability to the time an untimely death to a long-term care event, right? Effectively, when you build a financial plan, you kind of want to then start throwing darts at it, right? And saying, okay, well, what happens if this goes wrong? What happens if this goes wrong? What happens if this goes wrong? And understanding the what ifs there can really be very helpful. And that's ultimately what we look to do, right? When we're talking about a truly comprehensive plan, is trying to capture as many of those factors of the darts of what can go wrong and make sure the client makes an informed decision. Ultimately, that decision sometimes can include products. Sometimes it's a client just says, I understand the risk. Sometimes it's just a change within the plan. And whatever it is, as long as the client makes an informed decision, I'm a happy guy usually.
Jeffrey, you mentioned a word there that caught my attention, risk. How important is it when you're talking to an individual? How much do you delve into their personal risk tolerance?
It's critical. And it's, we talk about risk tolerance, and usually we're talking about investment risk tolerance. And that is probably the one that as advisors we focus on the most. And it's an absolutely critical portion. I think it's also important to, on the investment side, marry that with other things. For instance, someone might come to you and say, I have no tolerance for risk. Any loss of any money is going to make me feel very uncomfortable. But we might go through their financial plan and say, well, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, that's fine, and we can be extraordinarily conservative with your investments. But you've also told us you'd like to spend $10,000 a month in retirement, and if we implement a super conservative portfolio that might be in line with how you feel, you're probably only going to be able to spend about $80,000 or $90,000 in retirement. Are you okay with that? And the client will usually come back and either say like, okay, I'm okay with that trade-off if it means I don't have to stomach more of these ups and downs now. Or sometimes the client will say, actually that doesn't feel very good. What can I do to change it? And it might mean you've got to have a little bit more of a fortitude in your stomach today, right? You've got to be willing to take a little bit more of the ups and downs. But we can also look at other tolerances. For instance, depending upon someone's particular situation from a tax perspective, there's a lot of things in the law that are black and white, right? Very clear, like you can do this or you can't do this. But there are a lot of strategies out there, particularly on the cutting edge, that have varying degrees of gray to them. Some which, tax courts have blessed, but the IRS doesn't love. Well, if the tax courts have said yes, but the IRS doesn't love it, are you okay? Like, there's also a lot of tax risk tolerance sometimes for our higher net worth clients. What sort of cutting edge estate planning strategies are you comfortable with? How comfortable are you with litigating with the IRS down the road? If a client says, I don't want any of that, that's, then you probably need to be more conservative. Sometimes a client will say, yeah, I'm willing to push the envelope here because as long as we're doing what we think is right, I'm willing to take the risk that the IRS challenges it down the road because my potential tax savings is so great. Again, a different type of risk tolerance, if you will, but going through those sorts of things, even from a sense of looking at, a young family, right? You may look and say, how much do we want to spend on life insurance? Some of that risk tolerance might be, look, it's very unlikely that a premature death is going to occur. If it does, we want to make sure you have at least some protection, but are you willing to change your lifestyle if this untimely event occurs? If the answer is like, we're willing to risk it, then maybe you don't need quite as much coverage. If the answer is, well, actually, if we have very little capacity or desire to change our life no matter what happens, well, then you have to be willing to spend a little bit more for that protection. So everything we do as advisors is usually a trade-off, right? There's usually some good, some bad. And I often find that if we're doing our job really, really well, much of the time we're not actually having to advise the client. We kind of just play educator, and the client goes, I get it now. That's the thing that's right for me. And we're like, yep, that's right. That's correct. That's what we would do too. So often it becomes very apparent to the client themselves. Once they really understand the trade-offs, they can many times make that decision for themselves.
Something that's important to Legato Financial Group, and I'm sure it is to you as well, is every individual is different, but they want to make sure that they do reach out and touch their clients, keep in touch with them, make sure that, hey, not only are they getting results, that they're aware of the results, they're aware of the trends. How much do you recommend that? Is that different from individual to individual?
I think so. I think, we have our regulators in the financial industry have an acronym, KYC, Know Your Client. And they mean that in a very superficial way of like understand your client's assets and understand their resources. But as true professionals and true advisors, we need to take that so much deeper. And it's not just the X's and O's that matter. It's getting clients to take the appropriate action. It's working with the client in the way that they want to be worked. Look, some clients, they are never going to want to meet over Zoom. They want to come into the office. They want to see you face to face. Other clients may be busy professionals and they say, look, hey, let's just hop on a 15-minute call on Zoom. I don't have to leave my office. I can take care of everything. Like working with a client the way that they would like to work, I think is incredibly important. And also, we have seen the research that shows that it's not just enough to know what the right thing is. It's really important to get people to take those actions, right? Those subtle behavioral nudges. Yeah. I mean, you can go from everything from auto enrollment in 401ks, right? Like people know they're supposed to contribute, but when you remove friction, when you make it easier for them, all of a sudden, the things that they know they're supposed to do anyway, they start doing, right? And so being a great advisor can also be like helping to hold your client accountable. I think about, even a gym membership, right? How many people have personal trainers? And it's not because they don't know how to lift a dumbbell, right? It's because that personal trainer holds that person accountable. They are going to show up when they have an appointment. They're going to work hard because they are accountable to someone else. And an advisor, one of the untold benefits of an advisor is to be that objective person who just holds you accountable. And when we think about technology coming in and AI and all these awesome things, at the end of the day, no one is accountable to AI because then you're still only accountable to yourself, right? You need that other human being there to help guide you through that to where you are responsible for them and they are responsible for you. And that joint symbiotic relationship is what makes the magic happen.
Jeffrey Levine, so much great information. Before I let you go, for those who would like to maybe purchase one of your books, perhaps have you speak at an event, where can they go to get more information about Jeffrey?
Yeah, it's for a long time, there wasn't a great place. I'm in the process of relaunching my personal website, so Fully Vested Advice. One of the things I am also do is I am always in a vest. It's just my thing. And I'm a retirement guy, so hence Fully Vested Advice is the way to go. But I appreciate it. Honestly, I'm just happy if people are out there getting educated, whether it's from me, from anyone else. Hopefully they're doing that, then working with a great advisor like those you have at Legato so that they can take that information, put it into action for themselves. And again, like we talked about before, put themselves in a better place tomorrow than they otherwise would have been. Those little things day in and day out, over time, they add up to big changes and can have a huge impact for you and your families. And hopefully our listeners today are seeing those impacts themselves.
Jeffrey Levine, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. I've really enjoyed it. And thank you for not going over my head too much, okay? I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
Once again, Jeffrey Levine, and this is Gaining Interest, powered by Legato Financial Group. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.